Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Lit in Colour Pioneers programme launch event. We're very excited to welcome all of you who are joining us this afternoon. I'm just going to give you a very brief intro to what we're going to be covering over the next hour, and then we are going to jump straight in to our programme of speakers for today. So my name is Katie Lewis, and I am the programme lead for the Lit in Colour Pioneers programme at Pearson EdExcel. So I am going to be introducing and kind of leading us through the agenda for this afternoon. So we are going to be hearing from the Lit in Colour Pioneer partners this afternoon. So we have the Runnymede Trust and Penguin Random House joining us. We also have the pleasure of welcoming Tanika Gupta, who will be talking to us a little bit about her work, particularly around the Empress, which is one of our potential GCSE set texts for those of you joining us as Pioneer schools. And we are also excited to welcome Danny Ludwell, an English teacher from Bristol Free School, who was one of the original cohort of Lit in Colour Pioneers in 2021, who'll be sharing some of her experiences with us too. We are hoping that there will be plenty of engagement from you. We want to have the chance for you to ask your questions and for us to answer them. You will see that there is a Q&A function as part of the event this afternoon. So you can pop your questions in the Q&A. If you have any questions for our speakers that you would like me to put to them, or anything that kind of sparks a question for you about the programme, please do put that in the Q&A. We also have a couple of my colleagues from the English team at Pearson here in the background. So if you have practical questions about the programme or how you apply, then please do ask them and we'll be able to answer those for you this afternoon. So the first thing I am going to do is start by introducing our first guest speaker. So we are very pleased for the second year in a row on the Lit in Colour Pioneers programme to welcome to our launch event Halima Begum, who is the CEO of the Runnymede Trust, and she is going to give us a little bit of a reflection on her thoughts about Lit in Colour more broadly. So I'm going to hand over to you, Halima.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks so much. Doesn't it feel great to be here a whole year afterwards, after we really did launch a campaign, right, a year ago. So nice to be here. I'm much more relaxed this year than I was last year. So lovely to see everybody. I'm going to say something about Lit in Colour and why we wanted to be a part of this amazing campaign. So about a year and a half ago, Penguin Random House and Runnymede came together about a conversation about what we could do together in that anti-racism space. And this was particularly a few months after Black Lives Matter in the UK. And there was a very strong feeling that whatever we do, it should be something that could create a systemic difference in the lives of children and teachers and the kind of spaces that we occupy. Now, for Runnymede, of course, we occupy a number of spaces, but for Penguin Random House, it was a teaching space, a publishing space. So we had to think quite carefully about what that could be. And indeed, should it even be something that we do, but is it something that we do with others? And obviously the English literature curriculum, or the space of the curriculum, was quite an important space where we felt we had common interest. And so we launched this campaign with the idea that this was an open campaign where other players, sector players, industry players, teachers would want to shape the English literature curriculum in a way that feels that the curriculum could be more diverse, could expose children and young people to the diversity of literature that exists, and also signal, most importantly, to children from Black and minority ethnic communities that their histories, that their faces, that their stories, that their pain, their creativity is also reflected in some of the traditional literary canons that we then are focusing on studying in our schools. So that then led to a conversation about, well, how do you best enable that to happen in a more systemic sense? So what is the role of the examination bodies? What is the role of a school? What is the role of a teacher? What is the role of Runnymede Trust? So that really was the basis of the campaign. And, we're now a year into it. And I've got to say, those of you who don't know, the Runnymede Trust is one of the leading think tanks in the UK that works on race relations. We cover a number of research areas around housing, criminal justice system, and some of the really tricky areas on anti-racism, which are necessary and needed. We haven't done so much on the kind of public spaces and that space of belonging. So this is one of our more joyful campaigns where actually teachers, educators, students, parents even could think about, taking a principled action on anti-racism, but in ways that feel just so mutually complementary to what our ordinary lives should be. So I'm just so delighted to be part of this campaign. Can't wait to see what more we do. And really looking forward to this seminar and some of the contributions from our fantastic writers here and our educators and teachers. But before I go, I'm going to introduce you to Zahida Nabagirika, who is the head of social impact at Penguin, who will tell you something more about books and the place of belonging and where the sort of publishing role comes in. Over to you, Zahida.
Thank you, Halima. And yeah, thanks so much for kind of that introduction to the background of Lit in Colour. That's great. That means I don't have to cover so much of that now. So thank you. To give you a little bit more, the brilliant part about our work with Runnymede is that as a publisher, as Halima said, our kind of forte is thinking about books. We're not experts in education, but we're experts in books. And our research found with the Runnymede Trust found that fewer than 1% of GCSE students in this country answer a question on a full-length text by a writer of colour in their GCSEs. Now, to us, that is stark. To you teachers, I'm sure many of you aren't shocked by that. You're sort of aware of the issues, but we know that there's more that we can do in the publishing world in terms of getting books by writers of colours into schools and into students' hands. And this is where our partnership with Pearson really kind of brought the research to life in terms of we found out what the issues are. Now it's about making sure we're actually effecting change and thinking about practical things we can do from tomorrow that don't involve, big top level, top down change kind of from government, but things that we can do that will make a difference. So this is where the Pearson Pioneers, Lit in Colour Pioneers program really comes into force. So last year, we incentivized 100 schools to change their set text at GCSE or A level to one by a writer of colour. Now, this isn't just about Penguin, this is about all the other brilliant publishers who are on board with this as well. Sadly, they can't be here today, but we are joined by HarperCollins, we are joined by Bloomsbury, we're joined by Hachette, and we're also joined by some smaller publishers as well this year, as there have been new A-level texts, which Katie will talk to you about a little bit later on, but they are Serpent's Tail, Nick Hearn Books, and Concord Theatricals. So in terms of giving schools and students the text, we're aware that there's more that can be done. So the Pioneers program is also about thinking beyond those set texts, because yes, it's great to have the set text, but what about the context to those texts? So as Penguin Random House, we've also donated a mini library donation to every Pioneer school. So that's 300 books that Penguin publishes by writers of colour across kind of your range of Key Stage 3 up to Key Stage 5 to really support these new texts being studied in the curriculum. We also have a Youth Ambassador Reader Club, which I'll talk a bit more about later, but we're aware that there's a whole lot of support that basically needs to happen. Now, the 300 book library donation is kind of your classic text by writers of colour, but it's also new writing from some really exciting imprints that we have here at Penguin. So this book here, kind of on your top right, How to Build It, that comes from our imprint with Stormzy, the Murky imprint. And it's a really brilliant, non-fiction selection of work that's kind of giving young people ideas for how to kind of make their own ideas bigger and louder. But we've also got, some poetry from Caleb Femi, and then, Bernardine Evaristo, the only Black female Booker Prize winner. She's also included in the donation, alongside, really classic works by the likes of Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So there really is something for everyone that we've tried to incorporate into this library book donation. Now, this library book donation, it says on the slide that it's going to be arriving June to July. It actually will be arriving in June, because we've learned from last year that it's better to get the books into schools sooner, so before the end of term, so that you teachers and librarians can kind of look at what you've got and think about, how you're going to start using this library donation from before September. If we go to the next slide. So these are the books, Penguin books, that are part of the set texts. We've got Toni Morrison's Beloved as an A-level text, Sam Selvon's Lonely Londoners as an A-level text, and then we've also got Mallory Blackman's Boys Don't Cry. It actually has a new cover, which you'll see on a later slide. But those are kind of the texts that we are providing to anyone who chooses them. And last year we had some really great opportunities for engagement with writers on these texts, and we're going to be doing that again this year. So they will also be arriving with the library donation, so you won't be having to kind of look out for various different donations. It will all arrive in one donation to your school in June. If we go to the next slide. Now I'm going to talk about this, but there's a bullet point that's been left off because this isn't actually going to be available until the autumn half term. As this is a pilot, you're going to have to bear with us. Some things we haven't quite managed to get fully up and running, but we have created a Lit in Colour Pioneers Club because we were aware that, okay, we're catering to the GCSE and the A-level, but what are we doing for Key Stage 3 students? Because this really is, about a whole school approach. So in terms of what we've kind of done here, we've created a set of resources that you can use as part of an after-school club for your Key Stage 3 students. And the ideas and themes that we picked out from the books in the library donation really kind of link up very nicely with the GCSE and the A-level texts. So it's really kind of getting students to, I guess, start thinking about reading for pleasure and think about the kind of things they like reading about. So this is going to be made available to you from the autumn of 2022. We're still working on kind of just finalizing the tweaks, and it's not a compulsory part, of the Pioneers Club program. It really is just if you have an aptitude for wanting to put an after school club on for your key stage 3, really. I think I'm going to be handing over to Katie to talk a bit more about the texts themselves.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's, even though I already know what Pioneer schools get, because obviously we've been working on this now for the past couple of years, it always is so exciting to, particularly I think the donation of the 300 texts for the school libraries. I always get excited about that. Last year we had a little just for fun competition, so schools could send in a photograph of their books when they arrived, and we had so many brilliant submissions to our Facebook page of students helping to unbox the boxes. It was like either an early Christmas or a late Christmas, depending on where you think June and July falls in the year. But putting up displays. One school had a mural painted in their library based upon the set text that they had. We had students putting up displays and coming in and helping the librarians unboxing all the books. So it's more than just the texts themselves. I think it's more than just being a pioneer school and making that change for GCSE or A-level. It's also the enthusiasm and the excitement that being part of something pioneering can generate in the learners, and just that kind of, I could spend all day getting a new book out of a box and giving it a sort of just sniffing it and just putting it on a shelf. I find that so exciting. But anyway, what I am supposed to be talking to you about is the overview of the set text that you can choose as a Lit in Colour pioneer. So for GCSE, there are 5 GCSE set texts that you can pick from. You pick one of these so that you would change to from your existing set text. These are all texts which are established on the GCSE curriculum. And Each One Me by Mira Sayal has been there since the inception of the GCSE, and then the 4 additional texts that you can see there were added for 2019. So they themselves have now become a more established part of the EdXL specification. I'm not going to have the time today to talk to you kind of in lots of detail about all of the texts. And I think one of the other exciting things about the potential for being a pioneer school is, if these might be texts that you're not familiar with yet, is the opportunity to perhaps read through them, think about which ones are going to be the most appropriate for your cohort, think about the ones that might be the most relatable to your setting or your context or the interests or the wider curriculum of your students. So obviously we are really lucky this afternoon because we're going to have a chance shortly to speak to Tanika Gupta about her play The Empress. So I'm going to hold off talking about that one for a little bit longer. Zahida had mentioned some of the author events that we put on that Penguin kind of very kindly contribute as part of the Lit in Colour Pioneers programme. So Boys Don't Cry was one of the really popular choices for Lit in Colour Pioneers last year. Mallory Blackman's text, and you can see the updated front cover for that there that was mentioned also. A couple of weeks ago now, probably couple of months ago, time does go fast, we were treated to a live online event with Mallory Blackman. So those people who had selected that text, their students were able to come be part of that event, ask their questions and engage with her in a way which was completely kind of inspiring and motivating for those students. So that's the kind of additional kind of not really exam-y content, but just kind of inspirational literary content that comes along with the program. So do familiarize yourself with all of those texts if you haven't already, and let's have a look at what's going on for A-level. So the A-level situation is also quite exciting, and you will see, if you're already familiar with the Pearson edXL A-level literature specification, you will recognise that some of these texts have been there since its inception. So Lonely Londoners has already had a shout out today, or Beloved also, some other examples there, Thousand Splendid Suns, The Colour Purple. But very excitingly and very recently, we've added 4 new texts to our prose section of the prose and drama sections of the A-level specification, and you'll see those 4 texts added there across the bottom. And what is exciting is that if you're going to be a Lit in Colour pioneer this year, those 4 texts are also options that you could pick. If you were thinking about adding one of those into your curriculum, they're also available as your free class set for the Lit in Colour pioneer cohorts. So those texts there are Home Fire, The Cutting Season, Les Blancs, and Sweat. So 2 prose texts which slot into the existing themes that we have for A-level, and then 2 drama texts which slot into your post 1900, your contemporary drama requirement. I also wanted to draw your attention to the fact that, again, there are some really lovely text-based content that comes as part of the Lit in Colour Pioneers programme. We've got an event on the Lonely Londoners coming up at the end of March, where there'll be conversation around the context and the setting and the structure and just the kind of the rich kind of content of that text, and all the Lit in Colour pioneers who are using Lit in Colour, who are using the Lonely Londoners as their set text, are able to come along and engage with that. And in case I haven't mentioned it thus far, all those events are obviously free of charge. So there is lots more for you to learn about the set texts which are on offer for GCSE or for A-level. On the 9th of March, there's a free online event that goes through all of the new A-level set texts in detail, with the support and resources that are available for you if you want to make them part of your curriculum. And on the, I'm checking my notes, 22nd of March, there is an equivalent event for GCSE that will go through those 4 or 5 set texts with you, and also the Belonging collection, the new poetry collection, which was added to the anthology. So do sign up and come along for those events if you would like to find out more. And we've put them on quite quickly so that if you want to have that support before you make your final choice as part of your application, you can have a little bit of extra support in the background. So I am now going to move on to some of our even more exciting content for this afternoon, and it gives me massive amount of pleasure to welcome to join us this afternoon Tanika Gupta. So I've just provided just a little bit of information here. We could spend our whole rest of our time together this afternoon kind of going through all of Tanika's achievements and kind of past works, but she is an award-winning writer of stage plays that have been produced across all major theatres all across the UK, not just stage plays, but also radio plays, television dramas, adaptations for the stage. She's also taught drama, run workshops in universities and in a variety of different contexts. And in the kind of context of Lit in Colour Pioneers, we're welcoming her because her play, The Empress, is part of our edXL GCSE specification, and therefore it is one of the set texts that you might like to consider or to choose if you were to become a Lit in Colour Pioneer school. So please join me in welcoming Tanika Gupta to our launch event.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, I'm not bad. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for joining us. So we've obviously been hearing about Lit in Colour and the Lit in Colour pioneers and the kind of the aims to support schools in diversifying their curriculum. What are some of your reflections then on what you've heard and the importance of offering a diverse curriculum for students?
Well, when I was looking at all those books, I was just thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we'd had those when I was at school? Because, you know, we didn't have any diversity at all. And I was an English literature student at school. And it was actually only when I left school that I found a book by Toni Morrison called Beloved. And I read it and I thought, wow, you know, what an amazing novel. And it actually, in fact, interestingly, that was the novel that made me want to start writing. So because I hadn't seen any Black women role models at all when I was at school. We studied all the great stuff, Chaucer, Shakespeare, Arthur Miller plays, etc. But we never had anything that reflected our community. When I say our community, I mean a diverse community. So, and you know, I went on to write myself. And interestingly, all those books that you have on there, you know, by Mallory Blackman, for example, you know, these are all people who are my contemporaries who I know. Anita and Me, Mira Ciel, I adapted for the stage. So it does feel like it's very exciting that, you know, having been, we're mostly second generation immigrants. So it's very exciting to see that we, in turn, our stories and our forefathers' stories and contemporary stories are getting out there. And that actually you know, what fantastic work you're doing. I mean, apart from the fact that you've taken on my play, but you know, just the breadth of it is just fantastic. And gosh, if only we had that when we were at school, it would have made such a difference, I think.
Yeah, and it's quite a student-led drive, I think, at the moment as well, in terms of the kind of I was going to say the pressure, but I don't mean that in a bad way, but the kind of influence that students are putting on schools, on sort of organizations, on publishers and exam boards and all those kind of people to let us know really kind of vocally and articulately how they want to study a diverse curriculum and how they don't feel that the curriculum that they have in front of them necessarily does that. So yeah,
that's very exciting. I mean, it's a democratic process, isn't it? And that's what we want. But it's also that thing where society has changed, Britain's changed, you know, it's much, much more mixed. And so we should be telling all these stories and celebrating them all. And I think it makes a huge difference as well when you read something and you recognize yourself, or you recognize that character, even if it's not you particularly, but it's a world that you understand. So yeah. No, brilliant, very exciting. Got lots to choose from there.
Yeah, totally. And actually, when you mentioned adapting Anita and Me,
yes,
it reminded me that this is a bit of an aside, really. Sorry. Yeah. You adapted A Doll's House, didn't you, for the Hammersmith Lyric? Because the English team, we all came out and watched that as a kind of as a sort of team outing. And A Doll's House is obviously one of it's quite a kind of regularly taught A-level text, so there is a real kind of circle of kind of connections kind of being made across the different writers and the different specifications now.
Yes, that's right.
It was a fantastic adaptation. We thoroughly enjoyed it. So I was just, when I was sort of introducing you there, I was kind of just giving a few examples of some of your, you know, some of the writing that you've done. What was it about drama writing specifically? Because we talk about, you know, writing for the theatre, writing for radio, writing for TV. What was it about drama writing specifically that kind of attracted you to that genre?
Well, I'm like Halima. My background is Bengali, and my parents were basically arty-farties. So my mum was an Indian dancer, and my father was a singer, even though they had day jobs. But that was their passion, Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, who's the Indian national poet and Bengali. So I grew up watching my parents. They drove me mad because they were you know, very dramatic. But I watched them performing Tagore dance dramas, and so I was brought up you know, unlike a lot of my friends at school who were told, you know, you've got to be you know, a doctor, lawyer, an accountant, I was told you have to be a writer.
Mhm.
And so it's that thing where, again, you know, it's about what you're encouraged to do, which makes you believe in yourself. And for me, it just was a no-brainer that I was always going to be a writer. I tried to write a novel because I thought, if you're going to be a writer, that must mean you write a novel. And it was a really, really bad novel. And somebody read it, a friend of mine, and said, you know what, your dialogue's really good. Have you thought about writing theatre for theatre? I remember thinking, why did I not think of that in the first place? Because that's exactly the background that I come from. So it was a bit like a duck to water. I mean, I always wrote ever since I was a child. I loved stories. So for me, it's a bit like, you know, like an artist who can't stop drawing or painting or doodling. It was basically that's what I was destined to do. Although I had to work to make a living for many years.
Right.
So
no, that's I think it's whatever it is that our parents do, that's kind of part of their job, isn't it? To do it kind of flamboyantly in front of us and make us think.
It's it can have the opposite effect, of course.
Yes, no, that's true. Good going. I should have mentioned again before we started talking that obviously if any of our delegates this afternoon would like to pop any questions that they would like me to ask you into the Q&A, I should have reminded people to please do feel free to do that. So my colleagues in the background will be keeping an eye and feeding any questions that might come through to me. So I just wanted to remind people to please do that if they would like to. So obviously we've mentioned that the Empress has been added on to the GCSE specification now. And for people who might be a little bit less familiar with it, who might not have seen it or read it yet, would you mind telling us a little bit about the play and maybe some of your inspiration for writing it?
Well, I'll start with the inspiration first, and it basically comes from a school teacher. So there was a school teacher called Rosina Visram, who worked for the Ilia in, I think, the 1970s, 80s, and she wrote a book called Ayahs, Lascars and Princes. And it was basically because when she was teaching history at school, she could not believe that there was no black or Asian history at school. So she was very much wanting to write something herself to redress the balance. And she wrote this fantastic book, which is about the history of South Asians in Britain from something like the 16th century. And in that book, there was and I think I read it when I was about 18. And in that book, there was a picture of a group of Indian ayahs. That's ayahs means nannies, like Mary Poppins, basically, from the 19th century, sitting around a table. And they were all reading the Bible. I think one of them has the Bible upside down. And they're all wearing these incredible nanny's outfits, you know, like these black with the little white cap. And my first reaction when I looked at the photograph was, oh my God, who are they? And it said underneath the Ayah's Home, the Indian Ayah's Home, 1890 in Hackney. So that was the inspiration. And that's when I thought, I want to write a play about this. And I took it to the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and said rather cheekily, I want to write a play about British Asians in London in the 19th century. And the artistic director said, go on then. So The Empress is really about the journey of this 16-year-old Ayah who turns up in London in 1888. And it follows her right through to the end of Queen Victoria's rule in 1901. And so Rani is the real empress of the play, but the other empress is, of course, Queen Victoria. So I tried not to get too obsessed with Queen Victoria, but she had a relationship with an Indian manservant towards the end of her reign called Abdul Karim. So the play follows both these women. One is the Empress of India, who never ever actually went to India, and the other is Rani, who comes over from India, and it's about her life and how she makes her way in London. There are also other characters. I got very interested in the fact there were so many Indian politicians running around London at the time, like Mahatma Gandhi, and then the first first Indian MP for the Liberal Party called Dadabhai Naoroji. And when we talk about diversity, I mean, he was the first Indian who became a British MP in Gladstone's last ministry, but he was Parsi. So he was a Zoroastrian. So there were like Muslims, there were Zoroastrians, there were Hindus, there were Muslims, and they were all in 19th century London. And so that's what my play tries to address, to look at, but as well as Queen Victoria. But so it's a kind of like, just to show, you know, we've been here for a while, and, and you know, it's not like we all came over in 1960 or in Windrush. We've been here, part of the community, for a long time.
I think that's really important and really valuable. And I've always got my exam board hat on, which I try and take off because I know it's really boring for everyone. But when you're thinking about, you know, texts which are going to work in the classroom and texts which are going to sort of mesh together with other parts of the curriculum that teachers have to cover, particularly because we all know there's not that much time, you know, to get through the content. Another part of the English literature curriculum is a 19th century text. So you've got your Dickenses and you've got your Austins and your this and your that. And even though students, when they're studying those texts, they don't have to be assessed on the context, almost everyone who teaches those texts likes to situate them in their Victorian context, because otherwise there could be sort of barriers to students engaging with the bigger picture, and there can therefore be a tendency to have quite a narrow interpretation of what Victorian Britain might have been like. So a combination of a text like the Empress, which gives a completely different take on that Victorian period and Queen Victoria herself in that wider context, I think would be a brilliant complement to some of the other work that teachers might already be doing in their 19th century texts. So if anyone was just sort of thinking about that from a planning perspective, I think that could be really great. And obviously for those teachers who might not be aware, context is something that students do have to engage with for their contemporary play or their contemporary novel. So it gives them an opportunity to do that in a really interesting way. So what you mentioned that you kind of started writing and you sort of almost can't stop, you know, like a painter who keeps on painting. Do you have a particular kind of approach or process when you go about starting to write a play? And did they all kind of come out in the same way?
No, they all come out slightly differently, and I think that I think the word I would describe my process is absolute chaos. Actually, that's two words, but yeah, I think probably I start from, I just love stories, so I'm often found hanging around bus stops listening into people's conversations, and you know, just reading. I mean, actually reading other plays and reading other novels is, you know, that's always been my love. I just, you know, or film or any kind of story. So I think that for me, politics is very important. So I think that being a writer is quite a political thing, in that you know, we aim to write plays which say something about the world in which we're living. And so quite often, I mean, there's enough politics in the world right now to kind of take inspiration from. And it's often the stories that the stories that interest me are often the stories that we don't hear enough of. So I guess that's where I would say I could take my inspiration from.
And was there something specific about the Empress that you wanted audiences to leave feeling or kind of, you know, knowing, of taking away with them? Obviously, the majority of our students are going to be engaging with it on the page, and there's something interesting about that, isn't there, you know, versus engaging with it as a performance. But was there something you particularly...
I think because I wrote it for the Royal Shakespeare Company, I was very aware of Shakespeare hovering in the background. So my nod to him was to, I think that it's kind of a springboard from the play The Tempest, which is that at the beginning of the play, the main protagonists arrive by boat in Tilbury Docks, and at the end of the play they leave. But the two people that don't leave are Rani, our main character, who is the Ayah, and her husband, and they stay. And for me, the end, I guess for me, the image of that at the end is that these are early immigrants. These could be our parents. and that's them in 1901. So it's again coming back to that idea that, you know, that this is migration that took place over a long period of time, and that actually, you know, these people stayed. They didn't go back because they wanted to make a difference in this country.
Yeah. Carry on talking about this for ages, but I'm aware of time. But just perhaps before we wrap up, just because obviously it's a slightly different context, isn't it? You know, you wrote your play, it was for the Royal Shakespeare Company, it was going to be performed on the stage, and now it's going to be a text that students read and study for their GCSE, and then they go into an exam and they analyze it and they answer questions on it, which I don't know, I kind of feel that might be a slightly strange feeling, you know, for your text to be used in that way. But how did you feel about the idea of it being a GCSE set text when you found out about that?
I was really, obviously really excited and very happy. But apart from anything else, I think there's a lot from the Empress that people can pick up on, because it's quite fun as well.
Yeah,
you know, there are quite, I mean, the relationship between Queen Victoria and her Indian manservant is written in a quite a humorous way. So and it's quite sort of risque at times. So it's quite interesting in terms of there's lots and lots of different characters. And I would hope that people would reenact some of the scenes as well, because apart from anything else, it's there to be performed. And actually, sometimes even just reading it out loud is you get more from it than just reading it off the page, because it is a play. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just absolutely, as they say, made up that people are going to be studying it, and yeah, and hopefully they'll get stuff from it that I didn't even realize was in there. So
well, yeah, indeed. That's what I was wondering. I don't know. Yeah. It's always a risk being an author who's you know, contemporary with the students who are studying your text, because they can reach out to you on Twitter. Yes. They can find you and ask you questions. I don't know if any of that has happened yet, but have you come across any sort of interpretations or ideas about the play that you thought, you know, I never even thought of that, but it's an interesting kind of take on it?
Yeah, no, definitely. There have been quite interesting feedback. Some people just absolutely love it, and some people have felt that it's very critical of the empire. And I think, well, yeah, I think that is the idea. I mean, it's just like the ridiculous.
Sorry, not sorry.
and have said that. So that's always quite interesting. But actually, what we do is we write to provoke as well, and to provoke a reaction. And if you leave people feeling, you know, moved in some way, then that's a really good thing. And if they've got loads of questions as well, that's very good, because you don't want to just preach to people and just, you know, preach to the converted. So yeah, no, it's very exciting. I'm looking forward to reading some essays.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been absolutely lovely to have you join with us and to have a little bit of a conversation with you. We will absolutely send you some examples of some student essays and their interpretations, or if they do any kind of, you know, performances or anything like that. I think it would be that would be fantastic. But I'm just going to say thank you so much, and I'm sure everyone in the audience would, if you could hear them, they would be joining me in thanking you. So for now, we're going to say thank you to Tanika Gupta, and we are going to move on to our next lovely guest speaker for this afternoon. So I am now going to be introducing our next speaker, who is Danny Ludwell. Danny is an English teacher from Bristol Free School, and she was one of the centres who joined the Lit in Colour Pioneers programme in our first pilot year. So we're very, very happy to have her join us this afternoon, and she's going to share some of her reflections on what it was like to be a pioneer. So welcome, Danny.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here and just to share my experience of teaching Boys Don't Cry and the Belonging anthology poems.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you. So why don't we just sort of start off, and maybe you can tell everyone a little bit about why you chose to apply to be a Lit in Colour pioneer last year?
Yeah, of course. So becoming a pioneer was the same reason I became a teacher. I wanted to expose children to another world, educate children about other cultures, perspective, emotions, advocate for and encourage our students to feel empathetic, frustrated, because obviously when you read these either plays, poems, novels, we all have a feeling, we all feel something, and I just kind of want to encourage that further, but also for them to explain why they feel that way. So to say, I don't like the character, okay, but why don't you? I think with being a pioneer, it's about ensuring that all our students are seen and heard. And that's what really makes me passionate about, this pioneer scheme, is I know from the books that we are studying and the 300 books we were given, students feel seen and feel heard.
That's brilliant. And I thought that was really interesting with what Tanika was saying about the opportunity for perhaps some challenge. So we were talking there about the context of the British Empire, so that could be one thing that comes up. But in a way, like you're saying there about literature invoking a feeling, you've almost got an opportunity in an English literature context, which is perhaps almost at a slight safe distance because it's a character or it's a sort of literary text, perhaps to confront some more challenging topic, challenging concepts and sort of prevailing kind of ideas and thoughts in a way that you might not necessarily be able to do in other subjects. So I'm totally sort of in agreement with you about that. So you have started teaching Boys Don't Cry and Belonging already, or you haven't started? Okay. And so when did you start? Did you start them right from the September term? Where did you put them in your teaching timetable?
So last year, I didn't teach Boys Don't Cry, but this year I started it at the beginning of January. But Belonging anthologies we taught last year.
And why was it that you went with Boys Don't Cry and the poetry anthology? What was it about those texts which
really sorry, I need to turn my light on. Sorry.
That's okay. Go wave your arms in the air so people think there's still somebody in the room.
Right, let's start again.
That's all right. I was just asking why it was that you chose Boys Don't Cry and the Belonging collection. Why was it those two that you went with in the end?
Well, with Boys Don't Cry, it's very accessible for all our students, and with our cohort as well, the plot is quite relatable for many of them, particularly when we look at the LGBTQ plus theme running throughout. And year 10, so this has been actually the best part of teaching Boys Don't Cry, I've had students share their experiences of coming out, and it's invoked like the most amazing discussions. And unfortunately, there are some students who don't necessarily understand the community, and in a very healthy way, those are being challenged. And they're able to voice their own opinions. And then I didn't realize it was like that. Interesting. And when we look at the history, as you're saying about context, talk about the history of gay rights and how it was only in the last couple of years that you could marry legally. And then with the anthology poems, which are brilliant, by the way, like really, really great. I like, and as the students like, is how it's all the way through a different time period. So it's not just a section we're going throughout. And it's how belonging isn't just about a feeling, about belonging to a place, to someone within yourself. And for the students, again, that's relatable because we all want to feel like we belong somewhere, whether it's someone or somewhere.
It must have been incredibly powerful to have been able to sort of share that experience with your students. I literally I felt a little lump come in my throat when you mentioned that Boys Don't Cry had kind of enabled some of your students in a kind of safe way to kind of have that kind of conversation. That must have been really kind of profound.
And it's so rewarding, and that's why it's so important, one, being an educator, but also being a teacher. And it's our duty to ensure our students feel that way. And that's why these poems and Boys Don't Cry are brilliant for it. It just allows those discussions in a healthy way and to ideas, again, keep it really healthy. There's no kind of going over the top and no one's being rude, it's just listening and just our ideas.
Fab. So if we step away from the text a little bit, so obviously the sort of program, there is the kind of provision of the set text and the provision of the library donation from Penguin, but also obviously kind of there's more around the program than just that. So do you think that the Pioneers program, do you think it's helped you in sort of diversifying your curriculum and bringing that learning into your school? How is that kind of how is being part of that Pioneer program helped you in that regard?
I think it's great. I think as educators, we're constantly learning ourselves. but sometimes we don't always, unfortunately, have the time to do it. So when the resources are given to you, there are events available. It makes it easier just to take your teaching up a notch. And it is, as I've said previously, it's our duty for our young people to make sure that they have this new information available. And I really like how with the books, the trained books, again, amazing. Like, thank you so much for that. We had World Book Day today, so celebrated. And I've never seen year 8 fight for books before. You had to tell them, like, calm down, guys. Like, you're all going to look at them, like stop. It's fine. And that's why this is just so great. And I just think if everyone can join into this pioneer scheme, like, they should do it.
Oh, fantastic. And that's funny because it reminded me. It must have been the last time we were able to actually do things in person, so it must have been like 2019 or something. We had our first student conference at Friends Meeting House in London by Euston Station, and we are fairly, touch wood, fingers crossed, everything crossed, confident that we'll be able to rerun that event again this year. So that's another exciting thing to keep your ears open for. But it was, I think it was on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and it finished at sort of 3 o'clock. And then at about 5:30, 6 o'clock on the same day, we got an email from a school who said, we left the conference, we crossed the road to go to Euston Square, and the kids were all like, can we go to WH Smith's before we got on the train? We've got like 15 minutes before the train. And they insisted on going to the bookshop, and they insisted on buying books, which some of your kids from Bristol Free School were there actually at that event.
Yeah, they
were. I don't know if you were there, but I think I remember. Yeah, I remember them. And it was some of the kids from going back up to Birmingham on the train from Euston, and the teacher emailed and said, I've never seen that before. It's like the power of being inspired, I thought
this is why I think it is just so important to have a range of texts, and the texts that you are given are brilliant for those reasons. There's range, and really, therefore, any student, we're not kind of pigeonholed, like, oh, actually, it's just for this sort of student. It's like there's such a range, and that's what the students need.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that came out really strongly from the Pioneers program. Again, it's that the text work across the ability profile, the text work across the kind of geographical profile. We did have a conversation at one point. I won't be kind of sort of naming names or anything of that nature. We said, well, our cohort is 100% white, so I was like, well, then your cohort 100% needs to have some diversity in their curriculum. So it really is a program, hopefully, that will find something in there for absolutely everyone. So just before we go, because again, I carry on chatting about this forever, if you could maybe give a bit of advice or give some recommendations of your experience of the program to those people who are with us this afternoon, if they're sort of thinking about maybe joining up, what would you say to them?
I'll just do it. Like, I don't understand why anyone would think otherwise. It's so great. You have these amazing books, the best resources. So for Boys Don't Cry, so that it was my first year teaching it, the resources by Edexcel were brilliant. And I was able just to use them. Everything's well thought out. The students engage fully. I have students who typically don't like reading. However, year 10, I walk in and the first thing that says, like, Miss, can we read? Can we read? We have to read. And if I have them like in my ear begging to read. So absolutely do it. Go to the event, enjoy it. If you have any questions, like, email. They're really, really helpful. I couldn't recommend it enough.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely lovely having you join us this afternoon. I'm
thank you.
I'm so inspired by the work that you and your colleagues at Bristol Free School are doing, and we really appreciate your time this afternoon. I am going to, well, I'm not going to, because I spectacularly demonstrated my failure to be able to do it in front of all of you. We're going to bring the presentation back up again, and we're just going to conclude this afternoon by letting you know some of the kind of key dates. So today, obviously, being the 3rd of March, this is our launch event. The application window for 2022 Pioneers opened a few days ago, but it doesn't close until the end of March, the 31st of March. So you've got the whole of the rest of March to make your choices around what you might want to do as your text, have conversations with your SLT. If you might need some support in doing that, in encouraging them to support you in making this kind of change, then do reach out to us via the Lit in Colour inbox and let us know. I mentioned a couple of these events, but I will just quickly recap. So next Wednesday, is our event on the A-level texts. So if you're interested in any of those new A-level texts that I mentioned, then do come along to that free event. These are all these register nows, these are all hyperlinks. So my colleague is also going to be putting some links to some of our sign up and registration links in the chat, but you will be getting these slides and you'll be able to use the PowerPoint to follow those links through. Then on the Thursday, the 10th of March, if you are a non-Edexcel centre, we know that you're not only making a commitment to diversifying your literature curriculum, because Edexcel is the only awarding organisation with a diverse curriculum offer at GCSE or A-level, but you're also making a commitment to change awarding organisation, and that is something where you will need and you will get support from us. So do come along to our New to Edexcel event if you're thinking of switching for GCSE. That is on the 10th, next week. Then on the 22nd, and by the way, there's no obligation to come to all of these. If you're thinking that's a lot of events in a month, I've got to teach full time. These are just really to help you in kind of making that decision. Everything's always recorded. You can always watch it later. If on our YouTube channel, if you didn't get a chance to attend. But if you're thinking about, oh, I wish I had a bit more information about the GCSE text or about the belonging anthology that Danny was kind of talking about there, you can come along to our free event on the 22nd of March. And then a reminder again that applications close on the 31st of March. Then there's about a month, mostly while you'll be on Easter, we will be reviewing the applications, and all of our successful applicants who are going to be joining us as Lit in Colour pioneers for 2022 will be joining us, will be notified, sorry, from the 25th of April. And then, as Zahida mentioned right back at the beginning, your free set text that you have selected and your library donation will be arriving in June, July. So you will get those before the end of term, so you can get your unpacking done, get your planning done, get all of your texts sorted out. So just finally then, before we wrap up this afternoon, your next steps. So you can, as a thank you for attending our launch event this afternoon, access your free digital goodie bag. So one of my colleagues is popping a link to the digital goodie bag in the chat. So you just click on that. You can sign up to the events that I have mentioned. You can also apply now, should you be ready and inspired to do so, to the Lit in Colour Pioneers programme. That is a click-through link when you get the slides, or in the chat, one of my colleagues will have popped the direct link for you to fill that in. There is a Lit in Colour qualification guide. So that's a little bit of a combination of information about the set text, information about the qualification and how those are assessed. And then also, if you are a non-Edexcel centre for either GCSE or A-level, and along with adding your new text, you're also changing awarding organisation, there's plenty of existing support, and there will be upcoming support for your switching for both GCSE and A-level available on our website. Please do take a look at that. And then, as always, you can reach out to Claire Haviland, our subject advisor, if you've got any questions. And we would be, as you can probably tell, we would be more than happy to talk to you at length, at interminable length, about Lit in Colour, about the texts, and about the programme, and about what we believe that could do for you and your school. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us this afternoon. Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you to you for being here with us. And I think it just remains for me to say thank you and have a wonderful evening, everybody. Oh, Lily has just popped up in the chat and reminded me, she might have reminded all of us, that litincolor@pearson.com. So if you have questions, you can email litincolor@pearson.com, and me or one of the English team will get back to you.